Hello everyone, welcome back, and today's we're going to the news video here to discuss. We got a couple of signings to discuss, a couple of waiver updates, some injury updates, and we're going to look at the Eastern Conference today, looking at teams who could be buyers, sellers, and teams who are sort of undecided right now at this point, going into the last month before trade deadline. We'll get to all of that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Internet Talker channel. Before we begin this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support on everyone else do with all of you guys. Don't forget to continue to subscribe so we can reach 50 subscribers, and leave a comment down in the comment section below discussing all that was discussed in today's video. Now, going to start off with the signings that have happened over the past couple of days. We only have one signing, but it's a pretty decent one, and I think one that's going to work out really well over the next couple of years, and that's right winger Martin Pospisil with the Calgary Flames, signing a 2-year contract extension with the Calgary Flames with the AAV of $1 million, and deal beginning to start next year. Now, Pospisil was a 2018 4th-round pick of the Calgary Flames. He hadn't been a really significant NHL player up to this point. He'd been playing over in the AHL the past couple of years, had 25 points in 47 games 2 years ago, had 10 points in 20 games last year as an AHL player. So far this year, he actually started out quite well with the Calgary Flames, putting up 6 points in 6 games. With their egregious start to the season, Pospisil was able to be called up, and he's actually done quite well. And so far in 34 games, he's had 4 goals, 7 assists, 11 points in his first NHL stint of his career. He's a +10, and he's a really good rough and tumble physical type bomb 6 forward. So this is a really good sign in my opinion for the Flames. He's a little bit on the younger side. He was going to be an RFA this year, so this is a really good sign in my opinion for Calgary. He's doing actually quite well in the bottom 6. With Lindholm now gone, there's a very likely chance that they're going to need some more bodies on that forward group. There's also been some talk about them moving maybe one more forward before the trade deadline, which is a possibility, and if that's the case, maybe they need Pospisil playing a bigger role. So far, their call-ups of this year have been pretty good. I mean, Connor Zari's had a fantastic season. Martin Pospisil, like we said, first in the NHL level, and he's doing quite well this year, so this is a really good sign in my opinion for the Calgary Flames. Pospisil is a very good bottom 6 forward. I think he'll work very well with the Calgary Flames. He's already doing really good, and I think on like a 3rd or 4th line for the next couple of years at $1 million, that could be a really good steal of a deal for the Calgary Flames. So this is a fantastic deal in my opinion. Pospisil hasn't had a huge track record of doing good, but I think if he can continue to grow off of this year, he should be a fantastic bottom 6 addition there for the Calgary Flames. So I really like this signing by the Calgary Flames. I do think this is going to be a really good deal for the Calgary Flames. I think this is going to be a fantastic move by them to sign him to a 2-year extension. So Pospisil, 2-year extension in Calgary, 2018 4th-round pick, hadn't gone into NHL action up until this year, but he's actually thrived at the NHL level this year, and this is going to be a fantastic move by the Calgary Flames. So Flames signed RFA Martin Pospisil to a 2-year deal, and I think this is going to age extremely well for the Calgary Flames. Then we go over to the waiver update part of the video. That's the only signing we've had over the past couple of days. The waiver update, we've had 2 waiver updates over the past couple of days. 2 players were placed on waivers on Tuesday. That was Axel Johnson Fjallby with the Winnipeg Jets, and Nick Bonino with the New York Rangers, but that was a different one. That was to be placed on the unconditional waivers for the purpose of contract termination. I'm not exactly sure where the Rangers are terminating Bonino's contract. He seems like a decent 4th-line center. I'm not exactly sure what's happened for Bonino, but that was a little bit weird to see that Bonino was placed on unconditional waivers. He may get another NHL chance this year as like a bomb end option. I could see a team who's destined to be a playoff team maybe sign him to like a cheap 1-year deal to be a spare, but he did indeed clear unconditional waivers, so Bonino's now a UFA. Like I said, he could possibly sign somewhere. I wouldn't be overly surprised if he didn't sign and he would try and gear to his abilities towards next year, but Bonino hasn't done an overly great job this year in the Rangers. I'm not sure if just his play would warrant them terminating his contract, but they do wind up terminating his contract after placing him on unconditional waivers. So a little bit of a weird move there for the Rangers, but Bonino is no longer a member of New York, and he's now a UFA, and he should be able to sign with a new team before a trade deadline should he want to. So it'll be interesting to see how that works. As for Fjallby, he was placed on actual waivers for the purpose of being demoted to the AHL. Now the Jets were getting Mark Scheifele back. They needed a little bit more roster space, so they sent Fjallby on waivers. I thought there was a chance that someone could have claimed him. Fjallby's a decent 4th-line spare forward. He can definitely play really well on the 4th line, so I thought with some teams maybe having a little bit more troubles this year on like the 4th line with some forward depth with some injuries, I thought there was a chance for Fjallby Fjallby would be claimed, but he didn't. He wound up being cleared. So very good stuff there for the Jets. We're able to place Fjallby waivers and not lose him, and he should be an easy call-up option for the Jets should they wind up running into injuries and they need some more help from the injury bug. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens there, but I'm not overly surprised he wound up clearing. I thought there would have been a team or two out there who would have been a chance to claim him, given they have some injuries, but Fjallby's a decent fourth line forward. Doesn't seem like very many teams thought he was an upgrade on what they have right now, and Fjallby will go back to the minors, play some more time in the minors, and if they run into some more injuries, he should be an easily fantastic call-up option for the Jets. So it's a very fantastic move there from Winnipeg and the waiver update part of the video. So Fjallby clears waivers and is assigned to the minors and should be able to be a call-up option in a little while for the Jets. Well, for the New York Rangers, Bonino's been placed on unconditional waivers. He was sent down to the purpose of contract termination, and he does wind up clearing, and he's now UFA. So interesting stuff there for the waiver update part of the video. Then we have a couple of injury updates here for the past couple of days. Most of these are going to be players who have been cleared to play. There are a couple of players who over the past 3 days wound up being injured. NYR took a bad hit from Brandon Dillon. He's now going to be out with the upper body injury for an unknown period of time, so that's a really bad blow for the Penguins to lose the cell bomb 6-4 like Achari. Martin Pospisil has had a shoulder injury. I think he had some sort of surgery, if I'm correct. He's going to be out for the next 5 months. So for Poitras, that keeps him out until June or July, and that's basically going to keep him out for the rest of the season. So that's a horrible blow for the Bruins. Poitras has been a really fantastic find there for the Boston Bruins. He's actually been really good as like a third or fourth line center this year. He's been a great find for Boston. He looks like he has a future as a top 6 center in Boston, but now they don't have him for the rest of the season, which I think could also increase the likelihood of Boston adding a center before the trade deadline. So that's a really bad blow there for the Boston Bruins. And then we have a couple more injuries. Patrick Moon has a back injury. He's going to be out for about 4 to 6 weeks. That's a bad blow. I do wonder if this maybe hinders the Wild possibly trading him with the trade deadline if they are going to be sellers. That 4 to 6 week time frame puts them out at around the trade deadline period of time, probably just after the trade deadline. So hopefully he's going to be out back a little bit sooner and he can be healthy going into the trade deadline. But I do wonder if that maybe hinders the teams from acquiring him. So we'll have to wait and see on that. And then Mikhail Sergachev took a really bad blow, got a reverse hit from the Laxey Lafreniere in yesterday's game against the New York Rangers, and his leg sort of twisted in a really weird way, and he got stretchered off the ice. It was a really bad play there from Sergachev, a really fluke accident, and that was just a really bad blow there for Sergachev. A lot of people were saying that he's probably going to be out for a very long time with that injury. They're calling it lower body right now. It's going to be an unknown period of time. At this point in time, that's probably the safest assessment, but Sergachev is probably going to be out for, my guess would be at the very least the next month or two, maybe even longer. So it's going to be a long period of recovery time for Sergachev, and who's already missed a ton of time this year for the Bolts. And that's going to be another bad injury blow for the Tampa Bay Lightning, as that's a top 4 defenseman on a team that doesn't have the overly great depth on the blue line. So really bad blow there for the Bolts to lose Sergachev. But on top of that, we did see Jack Hughes be cleared to play and should get back into game action in not too distant future. Casey Cizikas be cleared to play. He should get back into game action in not too distant future. Vinny Lettieri, Eric Chernak, and Tyler Johnson for Minnesota, Tampa, and Chicago respectively have all been cleared to play and got back into game action. Well, Vladislav Kolyashchinok was cleared to play for the Arizona Coyotes. Owen Tippett for the Philadelphia Flyers. Riley Smith for Pittsburgh Penguins. Max Pacioretty for the Washington Capitals, Nick Cousins for the Florida Panthers, and then Jake DeBrusk and Derek Forbort for the Boston Bruins. All of them were cleared to play, and all of them got back into game action for those teams, except for Kolyashchinok, who I think has either been sent to the minors or should be able to get back into game action in the not too distant future. So really good stuff there for those teams, and those guys should be able to get back into game action in the not too distant future. Lots of good stuff there on the injury front, but still really bad to see Poitras go down with an injury, Maroon go down with an injury, and Sergachev most likely is going to be out for the next couple of months. So that's a horrible blow there for Tampa Bay Lightning, but definitely some bad injury updates there for the past couple of days. And now going over to the trade rumor part of the video. Once again, just like we did on Tuesday, we're going to preview the buyers and sellers of the conference. So on Tuesday, we did the Western Conference. I'll link it up here on the YouTube cards. We discussed the buyers, the sellers, and the teams who are currently undecided now, who it could see going either way. We're going to do the exact same thing here, but for the Eastern Conference. We're going to discuss the Eastern Conference buyers, the Eastern Conference sellers, and teams who it could see going either way. So in the West, we had 6 teams who I said were buyers, 5 teams sellers, and 5 teams who I said were on the undecided mark. It's a lot more teams on the undecided mark in the Eastern Conference. Right now, I see 4 teams in the Eastern Conference, maybe 5, being buyers. I see the Rangers being buyers, the Hurricanes being buyers, the Bruins being buyers, the Panthers being buyers, and to some extent, maybe the Maple Leafs being buyers. Now, for the Rangers, we know they need some more center help. They have lost Hedl due to injury. Before that, they were already looking for a center. It sounds like they're looking for a third line and a fourth line center. There had been a lot of talk about them being linked to a guy like Adam Henrique. I do wonder if they could try and go after maybe a little bit more of a different guy like Alex Wenberg or Jack Roslovic. I do think there's a couple of players that they could target as a solid third line center for them. So I do think the Rangers are going to add a solid third line center. I do wonder if they maybe try and add like a top six right winger or two. And on top of that, maybe they also try and add like a third pair defense. And I think the Rangers could be a team who ends up being busy. We have heard from the recent Inside Trading video on TSN that the Rangers are not overly fond of moving their 2024 first round pick because they want to have it for the 2024 draft at the Sphere. So that'll be an interesting thing to do, but that's not how their 2024 pick is on the table, which I think is why we've been hearing a lot of talk about Kaapo Kakko being a possible trade candidate for New York Rangers. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. But I do think the Rangers are going to be full on buyers at this year's trade deadline. Bruins, same sort of thing. We just saw them lose Poitras for the rest of the season. Zaka and Coyle are decent centers, but they're not a 1-2 punch that you want to go into with down the middle going into the playoffs. Now you lost on Lindholm, you lost down on Monahan. There's not really a whole bunch of really good center upgrades who could definitely take over for Coyle as like a second line center. I do think there's a possibility they could also be guys who go after guys like Wenberg, Roslovic, Henrique. So I do think there's a possibility the Bruins could add a top six center before the trade deadline. And I do think there's a possibility they could also try and add depth defenseman. Their goaltending is pretty good. They have a pretty good forward group. I think they just need some help down the middle, and they do think they could also add depth defenseman. So I'll definitely say the Bruins are going to be adders. Carolina, same sort of thing. I think they could also be a team who makes some additions. You know, it's guys like Bunting and D'Angelo have been guys who have been mentioned being on the block as possible trade chips to try and move off salary to gain some back. We could see him go after a goaltender. I'm not sure if they're overly confident in going into the playoffs with Kochetkov and Ranta. So even if it's just like a depth addition to sort of stabilize it, I do think there's a very likely possibility they could try and go after a goaltender. I know they also have Spencer Martin, but still, I think there's a very likely possibility they could go out and try and add a goaltender. So it's quite possible that could happen. I think they could also try and add maybe another depth defenseman. D'Angelo hasn't worked out overly well. I could see them trying to add depth defenseman. I could also see them try and add a top 9 forward who could definitely help and work out in their top 9. So I think that they could try and add like a forward and a goaltender before deadline, maybe a depth defenseman. So I definitely think Carolina is going to be buyers this year's trade deadline. Florida, same sort of thing. I think they could benefit from adding another top 9 forward. I do think they could try and add like a third pair defenseman. I think those two positions will be the most likely that the Panthers try and target, but definitely it's going to be interesting to see. But Florida is in a really good position right now. I definitely think that they're going to be a team to watch out for when it comes to trying to add the deadline. And on top of that, Toronto, to some extent, I think could wind up being buyers. I'm not exactly sure if they're going to be standing pat. I don't think they're going to sell, but I think they're going to be a buyer to some extent. Now, whether that's just adding a depth player like a depth defenseman or depth forward to try and help their team just stabilize a little bit, I think that's a very likely possibility, but I could also see them be big buyers. We have heard a lot of people talk about if the Leafs should really be buyers this year. I think even if they weren't going to be huge buyers, they would at least add a couple of depth pieces. But there have been some talk recently about them trying to improve their team and talking about a major blockbuster deal with the Calgary Flames. So as much as there's been a lot of talk about, is this really the year for the Leafs to buy? I do think there's a possibility they could be decent buyers, or they could be low-end buyers. I don't think they're going to sell. I think it's very unlikely they're going to stand pat. I think they're going to buy to some extent, but I don't know if it's going to be a huge buying list for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So we'll have to wait and see exactly how that works, but I definitely think that the Carolina Hurricanes, Boston Bruins, New York Rangers, Florida Panthers, and Toronto Maple Leafs are all going to be buyers at this year's trade deadline. Then I think we also have 4 sellers at this year's trade deadline in the Eastern Conference. First, the Montreal Canadiens. We've already seen them try and move off some pieces. They're not too far of a playoff spot, but I don't think either making the playoffs this year and the amount of teams they have to jump, I don't see it this year. So they've already moved off Sean Monahan to Winnipeg. We could see some more moves out of Montreal. We know Jake Allen's a very likely trade candidate before trade deadline. We've heard David Savard's name has been out there. Christian Dvorak could have been moved, but he's now injured. I do wonder about a couple of other guys. Could Yoel Armia be moved by the Montreal Canadiens? Is there a possibility Anderson or Gallagher gets moved? That's another possibility. Could we see one of the young defensemen get moved? Because they have a ton of young defensemen. Could a guy like Xhekaj, Harris, one of those guys wind up getting moved? That's another possibility. So the Canadiens are going to be sellers, and I think we're going to have to watch out to see exactly what they move. But I also wouldn't be surprised if they try and use some of their draft capital and prospect pool to maybe try and upgrade on their forward group. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what they do, but I definitely think the Canadiens are going to be sellers. Jackets, same sort of thing. Horrible season this year. They're going to be sellers. Roslovic, I think, is a very likely candidate to get moved. Provorov's name's been out there over the past little while. Peek and Boqvist, I think one of those two guys still gets moved. We know that Merzlikins wants a fresh start, but I don't think he'll get it, at least not this year. I think it might be more of an off-season move, so it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for, but definitely I think the Jackets are going to be a team who's going to be really big sellers of this year's trade deadline. Senators, I think they have a really good core. I'm not sure they'll be huge sellers for this year's trade deadline, but they are on the outside looking in by quite a big margin. I do think they will wind up being sellers. I think Tarasenko's a very likely chance to get moved. He recently changed agents, and he's now represented by a new agency, and that was like the second time in the last couple of months that he's changed agents. So I think there's a very likely chance that the Senators could try and work with the new agency and hope that Tarasenko waives his no movement clause and he goes to another cup contender. So I think it's possible Tarasenko could get moved. We also know Kubalik is a very likely chance to get moved. Eric Branson's a decent third pair defenseman. I think he could also be moved. I do wonder about a couple of other depth players, so it's going to be interesting to see, but I think Branson, Kubalik, and Tarasenko are the most likely to get traded. Maybe Chikrin or Shabbat. That's a possibility, but I'm not going to say it's a guarantee. So it's interesting things there, but I do see the Senators as being a team who winds up selling. On top of that, we also have the Buffalo Sabres, who I think are going to be sellers. They have a couple of pending UFAs who I think are going to be players who they wind up moving on from, like Ottawa, a good young core, but they're way too far out of the playoffs right now to try and make a run at it. So I see Buffalo being sellers. I could see him move a guy like Eric Johnson. There's been a lot of talk about him being moved, so I think that's a very likely chance that he gets moved. I could see a lot of teams have some interest in the third pair defenseman like him. On top of that, I could also see some teams have some interest in the guy like Victor Olofsson, who's a decent middle six scorer. Zimagius Girgensons, I think, could also be moved, who's a decent fourth line penalty killer. I think the Sabres will be open to retaining some money if it was able to get them a little bit of a higher draft pick. So I do think there's a very likely chance that those three guys wind up getting moved. I'm not exactly sure if there's any other guys. I could see Casey Milsat to some extent be moved too, so we'll have to wait and see on Buffalo, but I do think that the Sabres, who are way out of a playoff spot, as are the Senators, Jackets, and Canadians, I do think those four teams are all going to be sellers this year's trade deadline. I think the Senators and Sabres will most likely focus on just their UFAs. I think the Jackets and Canadians could try and move a couple of other pieces, but those four teams are definitely going to be sellers in my opinion in the Eastern Conference. But then you have 7 teams who are currently undecided in my opinion, and it could go a variety of different ways. And these are teams who I think could either stamp at the trade deadline, buy at the trade deadline, sell at the trade deadline, or buy and sell at the trade deadline. So there are going to be a lot of teams out there who I think could definitely either buy or sell or both. So first you've got Philadelphia Flyers. They're in the top 3 spot in the Metro Division. They're in a pretty good position, but they have a lot of teams on their heels right now. The Islanders, Devils, Penguins, not too far away, and the Devils are getting healthier. The Penguins look really good. The Islanders have won a couple of games in a row now. So I think there's a very likely chance that those teams could wind up bumping Philly from a playoff spot. Remember, Philly's supposed to be a rebuilding team. They weren't supposed to try and do overly good this year. They have done fantastic so far this year. I do think there's a very likely possibility they wind up selling. I think they could be maybe small buyers, maybe move like a depth pick to try and add to their team. But I think they'll most likely be sellers, even though they're in a playoff spot. I could see guys like Walker be moved. It sounds like Steelers probably going to get extended, so I wouldn't expect him to be moved. But I could definitely see some other guys. Frost, I think, could be moved. There's been some talk about Scott Lawton. I think Connect is probably going to stay at this point in time, but definitely, even though the Flyers are in a playoff spot, I think there's definitely going to be some pieces out there who the Flyers could move. So the Flyers are going to be an interesting situation. Tampa and Detroit are both in playoff positions right now. They're both the wildcard teams. There's a possibility I think they could wind up being sellers. Detroit's maybe a little more likely. Detroit has pending UFAs like Patrick Kane, David Perron, Daniel Sprong, Shane Gostisbehere, James Reimer. They have a ton of pending UFAs right now that they could wind up selling if they were to wind up being sellers. But then in a playoff spot right now, I think there's a little bit more likely of a chance that they wind up being buyers this year's trade deadline instead of sellers, given their cushion that they have right now for a wildcard spot. So I could see them be sellers, I could see them be buyers, I could see them maybe do both. So it's going to be an interesting situation. Watch out for Detroit. Tampa, I don't see them being sellers, even if they were to fall out a little bit. They said they weren't going to move Stamkos. That's basically their only real trade chip there on the forward group. That's a pending UFA besides a couple of depth options. So I don't really see Tampa being sellers. So I do think that's a very likely possibility for the Bulls that they either buy or they stand pat. So it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for. But I do think there's a very likely chance it could do one or the other. On top of that, you have 4 teams who are currently on the outside looking in the playoff race, and Pittsburgh, New York, Washington, and New Jersey. For Pittsburgh, they want to try and make the playoffs. They want to be buyers, but they have said that they're not going to be overly great buyers. They're not going to give up first-round picks and really good prospects to try and improve for this year. So there's a very likely chance that with them doing that, they could try and move a guy like Jake Gensel, who may not want to resign with Pittsburgh. So Penguins could sell Gensel, could try and be small buyers. Not exactly sure what direction the Penguins could go at this point in time, so it'll be interesting to see which way they go. Jersey, I think they'd most likely not sell. I think they're just going to stand pat or be buyers, sort of like the Tampa Bay Lightning. But they have a guy like Tyler Toffoli, who could wind up being a really good trade chip for the New Jersey Devils, should they wind up being sellers. I could see the Devils be a team who ends up moving a guy like Tyler Toffoli if they find themselves on the outside looking in. So I could see the Devils wind up being sellers, but I think most likely they will try and be buyers and improve in that goaltending position, maybe add another defenseman. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what they do, but I definitely think there's more likely chance that they'd be buyers. But with Toffoli being a UFA and them being on the outside looking in, I think there's a possibility they could be sellers. Islanders, same sort of thing. Not exactly sure what direction they could go. I could see him stand pat. I could see him trying to add some more help on maybe like the forward group before a trade deadline. I could also see him maybe move a couple of pieces. We know Wallstrom hasn't fit over the wall in New York. I could see him get a fresh start. We know Pajot's been on a trade block for a couple of months now. I do think maybe they move a guy like Cal Clutterbuck, given the fact he's in the final year of his deal as a pending UFA. So I do think there's a possibility they could try and move a couple of pieces over here, but I'm not exactly sure they would do a seller sort of mode right now. And I think there's a very likely chance it could maybe be more buyers or stand pat. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Islanders do. Caps, same sort of thing. We've heard them at various points this year consider themselves buyers, trying to improve that top six for the forward group, maybe add another defenseman, trying to improve that D-core. But at this point in time, they're probably the most likely team of their teams who are sort of undecided, who are going to be sellers. They have a couple of pending UFAs like Anthony Mantha, Yoel Edmondson, who could wind up bringing them in really good returns. We've got TJ Oshie, who was mentioned earlier in the season as possibly being a trade candidate. I just wonder if there's a couple of other candidates out there who could be trade options there for the Capitals. So I think the Capitals could be buyers, but I think they're more likely going to be sellers or stand pat. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Washington does. But Washington, who I think could easily be sellers, Philly, who I think could easily be sellers, Detroit, if they fell out of the playoff spot, could be sellers. Detroit could be buyers. Tampa could be buyers. Pittsburgh could be buyers. Isles could be buyers. Jersey could be buyers. Maybe they wind up being sellers. Maybe those other teams wind up being buyers. Not exactly sure how those 7 teams are going to find themselves out over the next little while, but the next couple of weeks are really going to determine if Pittsburgh could be a seller, Washington could be a seller, if Jersey's going to be a buyer, if Philly's going to be a seller. Definitely, I think the next couple of weeks are really going to determine those 7 teams. So just to recap here, 5 buyers. Carolina is going to be a buyer. Boston, New York are, Florida, and to some extent Toronto. I think they have a little bit less likelihood of making big moves, but I do think there's a possibility they could add. On top of that, you have Ottawa, Buffalo, Montreal, and Columbus, who are definitely going to be sellers, even if it's just the pending UFAs. I think those teams are all going to be ones who wind up selling off some pieces. But then you have 7 teams: Pittsburgh, NYI, Jersey, Washington, Philly, Tampa, and Detroit, who in my opinion are sort of undecided at this point in time. I'm not sure if they'd stand pat, if they buy, or if they sell. At this point, I don't really know if they are going to be huge buyers or huge sellers, or maybe both. Not exactly sure what's going to happen there, but definitely going to be an interesting situation to watch out for. I definitely think there's a very likely chance those guys could be buyers, sellers, but it's going to be interesting to see how they do closer to the deadline to decide this. So definitely like to hear your guys' thoughts on all this down in the comment section below. Would you agree with me that Boston, New York, Carolina, Florida, and to some extent Toronto will be buyers this year, with Ottawa, Montreal, Buffalo, and Columbus being sellers? And if you had to pick of those 7 teams in the middle, who do you think will be most likely to go buyer route, and who do you think would be most likely to go seller route? Definitely love to hear your guys' thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. Also, what do you think about the waiver updates from the past couple of days, the signing update, and the injury updates? Definitely love to hear your guys' thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video, and if you'd like to, remember to subscribe down below. Thank you for all your support. I've never been able to without you guys. So don't forget to subscribe so we can change to 50 subscribers. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So if you check that out, I'll have links in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.